The Texas sun was barely peeking over the horizon when the livestock trailer rumbled up the dusty driveway of Broken Horn Cattle Ranch. Boyd Cartwright stood on his porch with his morning coffee, his weathered cowboy hat already settled on his head for another long day of work. At 68 years old, he had been running this cattle ranch alone for 3 years now, ever since his wife Elena passed away. He squinted at the approaching vehicle, expecting the powerful cutting horse he had ordered to help manage his growing herd of cattle. The trailer kicked up clouds of dust as it came to a stop near the barn. A stocky man named Willie hopped down from the cab with a clipboard in hand. His boots hit the dirt hard, and he looked tired from a long haul. "You Boyd Cartwright," Willie called out, wiping sweat from his forehead. "That's me," Boyd replied, setting down his mug and walking toward the trailer. "You got my new cutting horse." "Got a horse for you, that's for sure," Willie said, scratching his head as he looked at the paperwork. "Says here Thunderstrike. Registered miniature horse shipped from a breeding facility in Oklahoma. Destination Broken Horn Cattle Ranch, Bexar County, Texas." Boyd's face went pale. His heart dropped into his stomach like a stone thrown down a well. "Miniature horse. Son, I ordered a 15-hand-quarter horse. A working cattle horse. What in the Sam Hill is a miniature horse?" Willie was already opening the back of the trailer, clearly eager to finish this delivery and move on to his next stop. "Look, mister, I just drive them. Paperwork says Broken Horn Cattle Ranch, and my GPS brought me here. This little fella has been on the road for 2 days, and he needs to get out and stretch." What emerged from that trailer made Boyd's jaw drop so far it nearly hit his chest. Thunderstrike was indeed a horse, technically, but at just 32 inches tall at the withers, he was barely the size of a large golden retriever. He had a stunning black and white pinto coat that gleamed in the early morning light, a flowing mane that nearly touched the ground, and the most intelligent, soulful eyes Boyd had ever seen on any animal. But he was tiny, comically impossibly tiny for a ranch that needed serious working horses. "That's not a horse," Boyd stammered. "That's a large dog with hooves." "That's a registered American miniature horse," Willie corrected, reading from the papers. "Premium bloodlines, too. Says here he's been rejected by 3 different breeding facilities for failure to meet program standards and aggressive behavior toward handlers." Boyd rubbed his face with both hands, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Let me get this straight. Somebody sent me a miniature horse, a mean one apparently, instead of the cutting horse I paid good money for. All I know is the paperwork says Thunderstrike goes to this address," Willie said, already backing toward his truck. "Health certificates and registration are in this envelope. Good luck with him, Mr. Cartwright." As the trailer disappeared in a cloud of Texas dust, Boyd found himself standing alone with a horse that could literally walk under his other horses without ducking. Thunderstrike stood in the temporary pen, looking around at the vast cattle ranch with what Boyd could only describe as resignation in those dark, intelligent eyes. The miniature horse was surrounded by Boyd's 5 full-sized quarter horses, who were leaning over the fence from their adjacent pasture, snorting and stamping with curiosity at this bizarre newcomer. The size difference was almost comical. Thunderstrike could have walked beneath any of their bellies without his ears touching them. "Well, little fella," Boyd said quietly, approaching the pen carefully, "looks like somebody made a mighty big mistake, or a mighty small one, depending on how you look at it." Thunderstrike's small head turned toward Boyd's voice, and the old rancher could have sworn he saw intelligence and sadness in those eyes. Not the aggressive monster the paperwork described, but something that reminded him of Elena's rescue dogs, creatures that had been hurt and needed patience more than discipline. Boyd stood there in the morning heat, wondering what on earth he was supposed to do with a miniature horse on a working cattle ranch. This wasn't just a mix-up. This was a disaster. Boyd's closest neighbor, Magnolia Birch, arrived within the hour. Her pickup truck kicked up dust as she pulled into the driveway. At 55, Magnolia ran a small equine rescue operation on the adjacent property and had known Boyd since they were kids riding horses through these same Texas hills. "Boyd Cartwright, what in the name is that tiny creature in your pen?" she called out, climbing out of her truck with the energy of someone half her age. "Apparently that's my new cutting horse," Boyd replied dryly, showing her the paperwork. "Though I suspect the real Broken Horn Cattle Ranch is probably somewhere else entirely, wondering where their miniature horse is." Magnolia read through the documents, her eyebrows climbing higher with each page. "Boyd, do you have any idea what you've got here? This little horse's bloodline is worth serious money. His sire was Crimson Commander, one of the most expensive miniature horses ever sold at auction. These bloodlines can go for $20,000 to $30,000. "Then why has he been rejected by everyone who tried to work with him?" Boyd asked, gesturing to the notes about aggressive behavior. As if responding to the question, Thunderstrike approached the fence where they stood, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so small. Up close, both could see evidence of his troubled past. Rope burns on his neck, scars on his legs, and a weariness in his posture that spoke of harsh treatment, despite his tiny size. "Oh, you poor baby," Magnolia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "They tried to break you just like they would a full-sized horse, didn't they? Used the same rough methods on a tiny body." Thunderstrike's response was to lower his miniature head until his nose nearly touched Magnolia's outstretched hand. It was a gesture of trust so unexpected from an allegedly aggressive animal that both neighbors fell silent. "Boyd," Magnolia said quietly, "I don't think this delivery was a mistake at all. I think this little horse was meant to end up exactly where he is." As the Texas sun climbed higher, burning off the morning coolness, the old cattle rancher found himself wondering how he was supposed to explain this to his daughter. But looking at Thunderstrike's intelligent eyes and feeling something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt since Elena's death 3 years ago, Boyd realized that some complications might just be blessings in very small packages. The wrong horse had arrived at his cattle ranch, and somehow Boyd suspected his quiet retirement was about to get a whole lot more interesting. 3 days after Thunderstrike's unexpected arrival, Boyd discovered something that made him question everything he thought he knew about horses, big or small. He was in the main pasture fixing a water trough when one of his cattle, a young heifer named Buttercup, got her leg tangled in some old barbed wire that had worked loose from a fence post. The heifer's distressed bellowing echoed across the ranch, catching Thunderstrike's attention immediately. What happened next made Boyd freeze in his tracks. The miniature horse, who had been grazing peacefully in his small pen, began making high-pitched neighing sounds, urgent, almost frantic calls. Within seconds, Boyd's lead quarter horse, a mare named Dusty Rose, trotted over to the fence separating the pastures. Thunderstrike continued his vocalizations, and to Boyd's amazement, Dusty Rose seemed to understand. The big mare turned and went directly to where Buttercup was trapped, then began pawing the ground near the wire. "Well, I'll be damned," Boyd muttered, jogging over with his wire cutters. Thunderstrike had somehow communicated exactly where the problem was. By the time Boyd freed Buttercup, several ranch hands had gathered to witness the impossible scene. Thunderstrike stood at his fence watching intently until the heifer was safely released, then let out what could only be described as a satisfied snort before returning to his hay. Word spread through Bexar County faster than a brush fire in August. By the weekend, Boyd's ranch had an unusual number of visitors, all curious to see the tiny horse that was supposedly causing chaos on a working cattle ranch. "I heard he tried to kick one of your bulls," said Vernon Ashcroft, a neighboring cattle rancher who had driven over, with his morning coffee still steaming in a travel mug. "That's funny," Boyd replied, pointing to where Thunderstrike was standing peacefully near the fence, with Boyd's largest quarter horse lying down beside his pen, as close as she could get to the miniature. "Because all he's done is make friends with every horse and cow on this property." Magnolia arrived that afternoon with Dr. Autumn Silverstone, the county's most experienced equine veterinarian. At 47, Dr. Silverstone had treated everything from miniature horses to draft horses, but even she seemed puzzled by Thunderstrike's behavior. "His medical records show multiple incidents of aggressive behavior," she said, reviewing the documents while observing the miniature from a safe distance. "Biting handlers, refusing to be led, destroying equipment. But look at him now." Thunderstrike was lying in a patch of shade, completely relaxed, while Boyd's ranch dog, a blue heeler named Cisco, dozed peacefully beside the pen. The scene looked more like a children's storybook illustration than a dangerous animal situation. "Dr. Silverstone," Magnolia said thoughtfully. "What if those previous facilities were the problem, not Thunderstrike?" The veterinarian considered this while watching the miniature's calm demeanor. It's definitely possible. Miniature horses are incredibly intelligent, and they're more sensitive than full-sized horses because of their size. If he was handled roughly or kept in stressful conditions, he might have been defending himself. Plus, many facilities don't know how to properly work with miniatures. They either treat them like toys or use the same forceful methods they'd use on a 1,000-pound horse on a 70-pound miniature. That evening, as Boyd made his rounds feeding the animals, the miniature horse approached his fence and gently took a handful of hay directly from Boyd's weathered hands. His tiny muzzle was so soft that Boyd barely felt it. "Elena always said animals know good hearts from bad ones," Boyd whispered to himself, remembering his late wife's wisdom about the rescue animals she had cared for over the years. The next morning brought an unwelcome phone call that would change everything. Boyd answered on the third ring to hear an agitated voice on the other end. "This is Brutus Ironwood from Ironwood Miniature Horse Ranch in Oklahoma. I'm looking for a miniature horse that was supposed to be delivered to Broken Horn Miniature Horse Farm last week. Black and white pinto, goes by Thunderstrike. My shipping tracker shows the transport stopped at your location." Boyd's stomach sank as he realized their peaceful interlude was about to end. "Yes, sir, he's here. Driver said he had the right address." Well, he didn't. "That horse is scheduled for transport to a livestock auction in 2 days. He's caused nothing but problems, and I want him gone. I'm sending another truck to pick him up this afternoon." After hanging up, Boyd walked slowly to the pasture where Thunderstrike had made friends with all his full-sized horses. The miniature's presence had transformed the entire atmosphere of the ranch, bringing a lightness that Boyd hadn't felt since Elena's death. "I'm sorry, little guy," Boyd said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Looks like your vacation's over." Thunderstrike approached the fence and pressed his small head against Boyd's leg as high as he could reach, as if sensing that their time together was coming to an end. In that moment, the old cattle rancher made a decision that would surprise everyone who knew his practical nature. He pulled out his phone and called Brutus Ironwood back. "Mr. Ironwood, this is Boyd Cartwright again. I'd like to make you an offer for that horse." The silence on the other end lasted so long that Boyd wondered if the man had hung up on him. Finally, Brutus Ironwood's gruff voice came through the speaker. "You want to buy Thunderstrike. Mr. Cartwright, do you have any idea what kind of liability you'd be taking on? That miniature has cost me more in vet bills and damaged equipment than he's worth." "How much?" Boyd asked simply. $8,000. And that's just to get him off my books. But I'm telling you, Cartwright, you'll regret it. That animal's got a mean streak a mile wide." Boyd looked at Thunderstrike, who was gently nuzzling one of his quarter horses through the fence, showing the kind of social behavior that contradicted everything in his file. "I'll give you $5,000 cash, and you never have to worry about him again." The negotiation that followed revealed more about Thunderstrike's troubled history than the official paperwork ever had. Brutus Ironwood had purchased the miniature 3 years earlier for his premium bloodlines, expecting him to become the cornerstone of an elite breeding operation for show miniatures. "Spent $18,000 on him at auction," Brutus admitted reluctantly. "But he wouldn't cooperate with our handling program. Got defensive with handlers, knocked over equipment with his hooves. 3 different show facilities rejected him before I got stuck with him. Little horse, big attitude problem." "What if the problem wasn't the horse?" Boyd asked quietly. "What's that supposed to mean? Maybe he just needed the right environment. Different handling, patience instead of force." "These miniatures aren't toys or just small horses. They need different treatment." Brutus laughed bitterly. "Old man, you sound like my ex-wife talking about her rescue cats. This is livestock, not a therapy session." But when Boyd mentioned that Thunderstrike had been peacefully coexisting with full-sized horses and even helping communicate problems with the cattle, something in Brutus's tone shifted. "You're serious about this purchase?" the Oklahoma rancher asked. "Dead serious. 5,000. Final offer." "Deal, but I want it in writing that you're taking full responsibility. Any injuries, property damage, lawsuits. They're all on you. That afternoon, while Magnolia helped him navigate the legal paperwork for purchasing Thunderstrike, Boyd received another unexpected call. This one, from someone whose voice made his chest tighten, with a mix of joy and anxiety. "Daddy, it's Ivy." Boyd's daughter, Ivy Cartwright Monroe, lived in Dallas with her corporate lawyer husband and 2 teenage children. She hadn't visited the ranch in over a year, their relationship strained since Elena's death when Boyd had refused to sell the ranch and moved to the city. "Ivy, honey, what's wrong?" Boyd asked, his heart racing. "I heard from Magnolia about some miniature horse you bought. Daddy, are you losing your mind? You're 68 years old running that ranch alone. What if something happens?" "Nothing's going to happen, sweetheart. This little horse is gentle as a lamb." "That's not what the internet says," Ivy replied, and Boyd could hear typing in the background. "I looked up this Thunderstrike online. There are incident reports, handler complaints, warnings about aggressive behavior. Daddy, this is insane." The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. Ivy revealed that she and her brother Fred had been discussing selling the ranch and moving Boyd to an assisted living facility in Dallas, ending what they saw as his dangerous isolation in rural Texas. "We love you, Daddy, but we can't keep worrying that we'll get a call saying you've been hurt and alone out there for days." After Ivy hung up, promising to drive down within the week to assess the situation, Boyd sat on his porch feeling more alone than he had since Elena's funeral. But as evening fell, Thunderstrike whinnied from his pen, a soft sound that somehow conveyed companionship. "They think I'm crazy, little guy," Boyd said, walking over to the fence. Lonely old widower buys a problem horse he can't afford. Thunderstrike's response was to press his small body against the fence as close to Boyd as he could get, his dark eyes full of understanding. "But you're not a problem, are you?" Boyd continued, reaching through to stroke the miniature's neck. "You're just misunderstood. Like me, I guess." That night, Dr. Silverstone called with news that would complicate everything even further. "Boyd, I've been researching Thunderstrike's bloodlines," she said, excitement clear in her voice. "Do you realize what you actually own? His genetics are extraordinary. With the right breeding program, he could sire foals worth $10,000 to $15,000 each. You're sitting on a gold mine." "Dr. Silverstone, I'm a cattle rancher, not a horse breeder. But you could be, Boyd. This miniature could transform your entire operation. Between his stud fees and selling foals, you could make more money than you do with cattle." As Boyd processed this information, he realized that Thunderstrike's arrival might not have been a simple delivery mistake after all. The tiny horse who had been rejected by everyone else had somehow found his way to exactly the right place, bringing with him possibilities that neither man nor miniature had ever imagined. The question was whether Boyd would have the courage to embrace a future that looked nothing like the quiet retirement he had planned, especially with his children threatening to intervene and the weight of Thunderstrike's troubled reputation still hanging over them both. But looking at the miniature peacefully grazing under the Texas stars, Boyd felt something he hadn't experienced since Elena's death: hope for tomorrow. Part 3. Ivy Cartwright Monroe arrived at Broken Horn Cattle Ranch on a scorching Thursday afternoon, her rental SUV's GPS having led her through the familiar Texas backroads she had once known by heart. At 43, Ivy had inherited her father's stubborn streak but wrapped it in the polished confidence of a successful Dallas attorney. She stepped out wearing expensive jeans and city boots, completely unprepared for what she was about to witness. "Daddy, where's this dangerous miniature I've been reading about?" she called out, finding Boyd in the barn organizing feed buckets with the methodical precision that had always defined his routines. "Out in the side pasture with the horses," Boyd replied. "But Ivy, before you see him, I need you to understand." "I understand plenty," Ivy interrupted, pulling out her smartphone. "I've read every report, looked at all the complaints. This Thunderstrike has a documented history of aggression. What I don't understand is why my father would risk his safety for some animal he doesn't even need." Their conversation was interrupted by Magnolia's arrival, accompanied by a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, wearing pressed jeans and carrying an expensive leather bag. "Boyd, I hope you don't mind," Magnolia said, slightly breathless. "This is Dr. Steve West from Texas A&M's equine program. He drove up from College Station after I told him about Thunderstrike's bloodlines." Dr. West stepped forward with the measured confidence of someone accustomed to dealing with valuable horses. "Mr. Cartwright, I've been studying your miniature's genetic profile and I needed to see him in person. What I'm about to tell you will sound incredible." "Can we please just see this supposed monster first?" Ivy interjected impatiently. The four of them walked toward the pasture where Thunderstrike grazed alongside Boyd's 5 full-sized quarter horses. The size contrast was almost absurd. The miniature looked like a foal next to the working horses, except he was fully mature and carrying himself with quiet dignity. But it was what happened next that left everyone, including Ivy, completely speechless. A jackrabbit came bounding through the pasture, spooked by a hawk's shadow. In its panic, the rabbit ran directly beneath one of the quarter horses who reared up in surprise, hooves flailing dangerously. Any other small animal in that pasture would have been trampled in the chaos, but Thunderstrike moved with lightning speed, placing his tiny body between the panicking rabbit and the stomping hooves. He let out a sharp, commanding whinny that immediately caught the attention of the quarter horse, who froze mid-rear. The rabbit escaped safely into nearby brush, and Thunderstrike calmly returned to grazing, as if he hadn't just prevented a tragedy. "My word," Ivy whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Did that miniature horse just protect a wild rabbit?" "That's impossible," Dr. West said, his academic composure cracking. "Horses don't possess that kind of protective instinct toward other species, especially prey animals they have no relationship with. The cognitive processing alone." But Thunderstrike wasn't finished demonstrating his extraordinary nature. As they watched in amazement, he approached the fence where they stood, moving with deliberate gentleness. Instead of the aggressive posturing his reputation suggested, he made soft, nickering sounds and carefully touched his tiny nose to Ivy's outstretched hand. "He's trying to communicate," Ivy said wonderingly, all her preconceptions crumbling in real time. "Daddy, this isn't what I expected at all." Dr. West opened his leather bag with trembling hands and pulled out a thick folder of genetic analysis papers. "Mr. Cartwright, what I'm about to tell you explains everything you've witnessed. Thunderstrike isn't just any miniature horse. His genetic markers indicate he possesses an extremely rare combination of intelligence genes that appear perhaps once in every 50,000 equine births." "What does that mean in plain English?" Boyd asked. "It means your miniature horse is essentially a genius. His cognitive abilities are off the charts for his species." The aggression reported at other facilities wasn't meanness. It was frustration. Imagine being incredibly intelligent, but trapped in situations where no one understands your needs or communication attempts. Then add the physical vulnerability of being a miniature horse in facilities designed for full-sized animals. Ivy sank down onto a fence post, her lawyer composure completely shattered. "You're telling me my father accidentally acquired a super-intelligent miniature horse?" "Not just intelligent," Dr. West continued, his excitement growing. "Based on his behavior patterns and genetic profile, Thunderstrike could revolutionize our understanding of equine cognition. Universities would pay hundreds of thousands just to study him. The breeding potential alone, every foal would carry some of these remarkable genes." Magnolia had been unusually quiet during this revelation, but now she stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "Boyd, do you remember what Elena used to say about animals choosing their people?" Boyd nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "She always said the right animals find their way to the right humans when both need healing most." "This wasn't a delivery mistake," Magnolia said softly. "This was Elena sending you exactly what you needed, exactly when you needed it." As if responding to the mention of Elena's name, Thunderstrike approached the fence where Boyd stood and gently pressed his miniature forehead against the old rancher's leg as high as he could reach, in a gesture of such profound affection that even Dr. West fell silent. "Daddy," Ivy said, her voice breaking, I came here to convince you to sell this place and move to Dallas. But looking at him, looking at you both together, I think maybe I'm the one who needs to reconsider some things." That evening, as news of Thunderstrike's extraordinary abilities began spreading through academic and agricultural circles, Boyd realized that his quiet retirement had ended forever. But instead of fear, he felt a deep sense of purpose that had been missing since Elena's death. The rejected miniature who was sent to the wrong ranch had turned out to be exactly the right miracle for a lonely widower who didn't know he was waiting to be rescued too. By Monday morning, Boyd's peaceful cattle ranch had transformed into chaos. News vans lined the cattle road leading to Broken Horn Ranch, their satellite dishes reaching toward the Texas sky. The story of the genius miniature horse who had been accidentally delivered to a cattle ranch had captured national attention overnight. Mr. Cartwright, Channel 5 News, shouted a perfectly styled reporter as Boyd attempted to feed his cattle. "Can you tell us about your super-intelligent miniature horse?" "Good Morning Texas would like to do a live segment with you and Thunderstrike," called another journalist, waving her microphone. Boyd retreated to his house, overwhelmed by the invasion. Through the window, he could see Thunderstrike standing at the far edge of his pasture, as far from the commotion as possible, his intelligent eyes clearly disturbed by all the strangers and noise. Ivy, who had extended her stay indefinitely, fielded phone calls with the efficiency of someone accustomed to managing crisis. "No, my father will not be appearing on any reality shows," she said firmly into her phone. "And absolutely no film crews near Thunderstrike." The most persistent caller was Roderick Goldspring, a billionaire horse investor from Kentucky who had been trying to reach Boyd for 3 days straight. "Mr. Cartwright," Goldspring's smooth voice carried the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. "I'm prepared to offer you $1 million for Thunderstrike. Cash today. $1 million. The number hit Boyd like a physical blow. It was more money than he would see in 5 lifetimes of ranching. Enough to secure his future, pay off the ranch, and leave something substantial for his children and grandchildren. That's a lot of money, Mr. Goldspring. It's just the beginning. With Thunderstrike's genetics and intelligence, we could create a breeding program worth tens of millions. I'm talking about revolutionizing the entire miniature horse industry." After hanging up, Boyd sat in his kitchen, staring at the number he had written on a notepad. $1 million. Outside, reporters continued shouting questions, and his peaceful ranch felt more like a war zone than a home. Dr. West arrived that afternoon with a convoy of vehicles from Texas A&M, including a mobile equine lab and several graduate students with measuring equipment and tablets. "Boyd, we need to conduct comprehensive cognitive testing on Thunderstrike," Dr. West explained, barely containing his academic excitement. "The preliminary observations suggest intelligence levels we've never documented in equines. This could rewrite textbooks." But when they approached Thunderstrike's pasture, the miniature's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. The tiny horse, who had shown such gentleness and trust, now pressed himself against the back fence, his eyes wide with what could only be described as panic. His small body was trembling. "He's terrified," Ivy observed, her legal training helping her read the situation clearly. "All these strangers, all this attention, it's traumatizing him. He's too small to feel safe with all these people." Dr. West frowned, consulting his notes. This is consistent with his history at the Oklahoma facilities. High intelligence combined with the physical vulnerability of being a miniature, plus sensitivity to environmental stress, it explains his previous behavioral problems. Magnolia, who had been watching from her truck, finally approached the group with fire in her eyes. "Y'all are about to undo everything good that's happened here. Look at that little horse. He's shutting down just like he did in Oklahoma." As if to prove her point, Thunderstrike let out a high-pitched, distressed whinny that echoed across the entire ranch. It was a cry of fear that made every person present feel like they were witnessing something precious being destroyed. "Everyone needs to leave," Boyd said suddenly, his voice cutting through the academic chatter. "Right now, all of you." "Mr. Cartwright, surely you understand the scientific importance," Dr. West began. "I understand that Little Horse is scared, and nobody seems to care about that except how much he's worth or how famous he could make someone," Boyd interrupted, showing more backbone than Ivy had seen from her father in years. "This is private property, and you're all trespassing. Get out." It took 2 hours to clear everyone out, including having to call the county sheriff to move the news vans. But as the last vehicle disappeared down the road, a remarkable transformation occurred. Thunderstrike slowly approached the fence where Boyd stood alone, his small frame still trembling slightly from the stress. "I'm sorry, little guy," Boyd said softly, reaching through the fence to stroke the miniature's neck. "I let them turn you into a spectacle. That wasn't right." Thunderstrike's response was to press his forehead against Boyd's leg, the same gesture of trust he had shown since his arrival. But now there was something desperate in the contact, as if the tiny horse was clinging to the one human who had ever seen him as more than a commodity. "Daddy," Ivy said, approaching carefully, "that Kentucky investor called again while you were clearing everyone out. He's increased his offer to $2 million. $2 million. The number was incomprehensible. Boyd could sell the ranch, buy Ivy and Fred houses, insure his grandchildren's college educations, and still have enough left over to live comfortably for the rest of his life. He could retire properly, maybe travel like Elena had always wanted. But looking into Thunderstrike's trusting eyes, Boyd realized that some things couldn't be measured in dollars. The miniature horse who had arrived by mistake had brought purpose back to his life, given him something to care about beyond just existing from one lonely day to the next. "Ivy," he said quietly, "call Mr. Goldspring back and tell him Thunderstrike isn't for sale. Not for $2 million, not for any amount." "Daddy, are you sure? That's an incredible amount of money. You could retire comfortably, move closer to us." "I'm sure, sweetheart. This little horse trusted me when nobody else would. I'm not about to betray that trust now for any amount of money." As father and daughter stood together watching Thunderstrike gradually relax in the evening light, both understood that they had just witnessed something rare in the modern world. A person choosing loyalty over profit, relationship over riches. The media storm would continue, the offers would keep coming, and the pressure would only intensify. But at the heart of Broken Horn Cattle Ranch, an old man and a misunderstood miniature horse had found something worth more than all the money in the world. Unconditional trust. Now they just had to figure out how to protect it from a world that wanted to turn their friendship into a fortune. 6 months later, Broken Horn Cattle Ranch had transformed into something neither Boyd nor Thunderstrike could have imagined. The media attention had eventually died down, but what remained was far more meaningful. A steady stream of visitors who came not to gawk or exploit but to learn. Dr. Silverstone had partnered with Boyd to establish the Thunderstrike Institute for Equine Intelligence, a small research facility that studied miniature horse cognition in natural, stress-free environments. Graduate students from universities across the country came to observe Thunderstrike's remarkable behaviors, but always under strict protocols that prioritized the little horse's well-being over scientific curiosity. The key breakthrough, Dr. Silverstone explained to a group of visiting veterinary students, was understanding that intelligence in miniature horses requires emotional security to fully manifest. Thunderstrike's genius was always there. He just needed the right environment, and a human who saw past his size to express it safely. Ivy had made the most surprising decision of all. After months of traveling back and forth between Dallas and the ranch, she had convinced her husband to let her work remotely from the ranch. She had moved into Elena's old sewing room, helping her father manage the unexpected complexities of running what had become an internationally recognized research site. "I never thought I'd say this," Ivy told Magnolia one morning, as they watched Boyd and Thunderstrike work together on a cognitive assessment that looked more like a game than a test. "But I think Mama sent him that little horse for both of them." The assessment they were observing had become legendary in animal intelligence circles. Boyd would set up colored cones in different patterns, and Thunderstrike would move them according to increasingly complex rules, pushing them with his tiny nose, arranging them by color or size, even creating simple patterns on his own. The miniature's problem-solving abilities had surpassed those of many primates in comparable tests. "He's not just intelligent," observed Dr. Luna Winterhawk, a leading animal psychologist from Stanford who had become a regular visitor. "He's emotionally sophisticated in ways we're only beginning to understand. Watch how he modifies his behavior based on Boyd's energy, how he offers comfort when the old man seems tired or sad, That's not just intelligence, that's emotional wisdom. But the most remarkable transformation wasn't in Thunderstrike, it was in Boyd himself. The lonely widower who had been slowly fading away after Elena's death had rediscovered purpose and joy. He had learned to use a computer to document their daily interactions, had co-authored 2 scientific papers, and had become an unlikely advocate for better treatment of miniature horses. You know, Boyd told a journalist from Western Horseman during their final interview, everyone wants to focus on how smart Thunderstrike is. But the real miracle isn't his intelligence, it's his capacity for forgiveness. What do you mean? This little horse was mishandled, rejected, labeled as dangerous by people who should have known better. Because of his small size, they either treated him like a toy or used force on him like he was a full-sized horse. He had every reason to hate humans. But when he found the right environment, the right relationship, he chose trust over fear. That's not intelligence, that's grace. The phone call that would test everything they had built came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Roderick Goldspring had a new proposition. "Mr. Cartwright, I've been watching your operation for months." Goldspring's voice carried the same confidence it always had, but with a new undertone of respect. "I'm not calling to buy Thunderstrike anymore. I want to franchise the Thunderstrike method. Set up facilities across the country using your techniques. You and your daughter could oversee the operation, train handlers, revolutionize how we work with miniature horses. We're talking about a $100 million industry." The offer was staggering, but it came with expectations. Thunderstrike would need to travel to each new facility for initial setup, spend weeks at a time training other miniature horses and their handlers, and make regular appearances at conferences and agricultural shows. He would be comfortable, well cared for, but constantly working, constantly performing, constantly proving his worth. "Think about the good you could do," Goldspring continued. "Every miniature horse in America could benefit from what you've learned. Thunderstrike could change the entire industry." That evening, as Boyd sat with Thunderstrike in their favorite spot under the old oak tree, he noticed something that made his decision clear. The little horse, who was only 11 years old with potentially 2 more decades of life ahead of him, seemed tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. The constant stream of researchers, students, and visitors, even under strict protocols, had taken a toll. Thunderstrike lay down beside Boyd's chair and rested his small head on the old rancher's boot with a deep sigh. In that moment, Boyd realized that all the good intentions in the world didn't matter if they came at the cost of the little horse's peace and happiness. Dr. Silverstone stopped by the next morning to discuss the latest research proposals. "Boyd, we have 3 more universities wanting to study Thunderstrike's cognitive development. The work we're doing here is groundbreaking." "I know," Boyd said quietly. "And that's the problem." "What do you mean?" "Look at him, Doc." Boyd gestured to where Thunderstrike stood in his pasture, no longer playing with the full-sized horses like he used to, no longer approaching the fence with curiosity when visitors arrived. "We've turned him into a living laboratory. That wasn't the deal." That afternoon, Boyd called Roderick Goldspring with his final answer. "Mr. Goldspring, I appreciate your offer, but Thunderstrike isn't going to be traveling to facilities or building any empire. He's going back to just being a little horse on a cattle ranch. Cartwright, you're walking away from a fortune. And more importantly, you're walking away from helping thousands of miniature horses." "No, sir. I'm walking towards something more important. Keeping a promise to a little horse who trusted me when nobody else would. He didn't come here to be famous or to change the industry. He came here to be safe." Over the next few weeks, Boyd made difficult decisions. He closed the Thunderstrike Institute for Equine Intelligence, referring researchers to other facilities. He stopped accepting visitors except for the occasional school group. He even turned down documentary offers and book deals. Ivy surprisingly supported every decision. "Daddy, I've watched you these past 6 months. You were happier in those first few weeks with Thunderstrike than you've been in all the months since the world discovered him. Mama didn't send you a research project. She sent you a friend." As Boyd hung up the phone after declining yet another lucrative offer, Ivy appeared beside him with tears in her eyes and a smile on her face. "Daddy, I'm proud of you. Mama would be proud too. That evening, as the Texas sun set over Broken Horn Cattle Ranch in brilliant shades of orange and purple, an old man and an extraordinary miniature horse sat together under their oak tree, surrounded by the full-sized quarter horses who had become their extended family. Thunderstrike's head rested on Boyd's lap, but this time there was lightness in the little horse's eyes that had been missing for months, the joy of simply being a horse again. The world still called occasionally with offers and opportunities, but Boyd had learned to measure wealth in moments like this, quiet, precious, and impossible to put a price on. Thunderstrike had been rejected by everyone who had tried to own him, sent to the wrong ranch by mistake, and had found exactly what he had been searching for all along. A human who valued his peace as much as his abilities, who saw past his extraordinary intelligence to the simple need for a safe, loving home. And Boyd had discovered that sometimes the best things in life really do come in the smallest packages, to those who open their hearts to creatures that nobody else wants. With potentially 25 more years together ahead of them, they had all the time in the world to just be an old rancher and his tiny horse. No expectations, no pressure, just friendship. Because in saving them, we often find that they've been saving us right back. The rejected miniature and the lonely widower had both found their home, and nothing in the world could be worth more than that. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.